I'm giving a little more detail than what even Durham described, but these documents essentially had case numbers. They were being investigated in these three different field offices, and what they were investigating and had found a high credibility of criminal activity was in four categories, and those were money laundering, securities and exchange fraud, public corruption, and terrorism financing.
Hey everybody, welcome to Our Watch. I am Tim Thompson. If you're new, we would like to ask you to subscribe to this channel, like this video. Also, if you like what you hear, we'd love for you to share this out with your friends, your family, your neighbors. Many people need to hear what we've got on our show today. Super excited to have this guest. In my opinion, we have a national hero here on the program today. Our guest today is Nate Cain. He's a U.S. Army veteran, a cybersecurity analyst, and the FBI Uranium One whistleblower who tied the Clinton Foundation to the sale of 20% of America's uranium to Russia. Nate, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, just excited to have you here. Like I said, in my opinion, you're a hero.
Well, thank you. I had a chance to kind of look at some of your videos and some of the things that you guys have been doing out there, and it's exactly the kind of thing that needs to be happening right now. It's something actually that, just in contrast, it's something that I've been very concerned about, looking and seeing, how the church has really had a very inactive approach, to dealing with a lot of the world's problems, especially here in America. And we have a responsibility, to be engaged, to be involved. God has given us an opportunity to be able to choose our leaders and to be able to be engaged and have those freedoms, and we can't waste them. So I've been really excited to see what you guys have been doing, and I watched your video the other night about where you were talking to the school board about the books in the schools. That is a problem, of course, that's everywhere, all over the nation, and so I just want to commend you on that, because I know that's not necessarily what I'm here to talk about, but it's something that's very important here in West Virginia as well.
Yeah, there's no doubt this is a nationwide problem we've got going on right now. Here in California, I don't know if you heard this, but our Gavin Newsom, our governor, he has set his sights on Temecula Valley, which is where I live, and he's coming after us. He called out our president of our board, said anybody who, first of all, he called him ignorant. Dr. Joseph Komrosky called him an ignorant man, and said that he's going to come after the Temecula Valley School Board. And the school board said, look, we're not going to have this stuff presented to children. It's just pornographic trash, sexual violence. And he's saying that he thinks these things should be allowed around our kids. So he's got a fight on his hands because parents are fed up. And, we look at what's going on, especially with the Democratic Party. These things are demonic.
Oh, absolutely. There's no explanation for just how bad things have gotten in the last 3 years, other than that there's something spiritual that's going on. I never thought in my entire life that I would ever see pedophilia being normalized and then adopted, by a single party. It just makes no sense. And the fact that you have these books that are going out in the schools, I can't help but think about that scripture that talks about, anyone that leads these little ones astray should have a millstone tied around their neck and tossed into the sea to be drowned. I mean, that's how serious God takes this. And so I think the church absolutely has a responsibility to stand up and resist this and fight against this, because it is something, it matters for the future of our country. It matters for the future of our families.
Yeah, there's no doubt, and it's a sad thing to watch with the churches nowadays here in America, especially here in California. You're seeing a lot of pastors that say, I don't want to get political, and I keep telling them, look, these things aren't political. These are biblical moral issues. Whether or not we allow a child to be exposed to pornography, that's not political. They might politicize that issue, but that's biblical. Godly men don't allow these things to be put into the eyes of kids.
That's right. It's interesting, the term groomer, I heard you mention that in your speech to the school board, and, a lot of folks don't like that term, but, the first time I ever heard that word, or that term, was actually on, it was Law and Order Special Victims Unit, which was a TV show, of course, about investigations into, children that were being abused. And it's, they were referencing, something that has been known in law enforcement for a long time, which is the way that these child predators, the way that they get these children to cooperate is by grooming them. And one of the first things they do is they expose them to pornography and expose them to, sexualization at a very young age. So, that's what we're seeing today. There's just no other way to call it but that.
Yeah, no, there's absolute grooming behavior on the part of many of the educators in our government-ran school system, and it's being exposed. Parents are waking up to this, and it's because there's people out there shedding light on it, which is exactly, if you're a Christian and you're watching this program, it's exactly what you're supposed to be doing, right? We are the salt of the earth, the light of the world. Light's a revealing agent. It shows what's happening in the darkness, and that's exactly what's happening right now. So people are waking up, and they're not good with it. Parents want their rights as parents, and we can see a tyrannical government stripping away those rights and giving the rights to the children.
Absolutely.
And they can't get a tattoo till they're 18. They can't have a beer till they're 21. But they're telling them they can change their gender when they're 5, and that their parents have no say in it. When they still have a bedtime that's 8:00, and but we're going to let them choose, surgeries.
It's a total level of insanity I never thought I would ever see. I was thinking about, I was actually speaking on this subject the other day. And the way I kind of, describe it, it's like, they call it gender affirming care. And that would be like if you had a drug addict and you said, oh, hey, I'm going to affirm, your addiction. And I'm going to offer you drugs and help you with your addiction. That's not something that we do. We try to help people, and I think a lot of these kids are suffering from mental illness. A lot of it is a social contagion. They're trying to fit in. They're trying to, but it's brainwashing what's going on in our schools. It's no longer, a system of education. It's a system of indoctrination.
Right. Absolutely. And I agree with you. We wouldn't go and give care to somebody in drug abuse, in way of trying to help them continue in their drug abuse. Sadly, though, here in the state of California, we are doing that. We've actually set up injection sites. Our tax dollars are funding nurses to inject heroin into people. It is just wickedness that seems to know no bounds, and it needs to stop. Let's talk about the Durham report. The Durham report just came out recently. In it, there's information that you provided to the Intel Committee.
Yeah, so I was a federal whistleblower back in 2017. I actually had 2 disclosures in 2017 and then in 2018. The first set of documents that I brought directly to the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, directly to one of their, Devin Nunez, as senior staff members. And he asked me to go back in and to get basically look for intelligence that the FBI had that would prove that the FBI knew about the Russians trying to infiltrate our uranium supply chain prior to the CFIUS committee approving the sale of Uranium-1 to Rosatom, a Russian energy company. And what ended up happening was I ended up coming out with that information. I ended up having to go through a very long process because I got cut off from my communications directly with the HPSI. And so I went through a process with a lawyer and went through the Intelligence Community Whistleblower Protection Act. But I eventually brought all the documents, the initial set of documents that I had brought out and handed over, along with the intelligence report. So on page 78, it's referring to primarily financial documents that were involved in the Clinton Foundation, CGI Global, and Uranium-1. And what it's describing there is it's naming 3 primary field offices, which was the New York field office, you had Little Rock field office and Washington field office. And it says there were financial documents as well as an intelligence report. That is exactly what I handed into Inspector General Horowitz, the DOJ IG. It was primarily made up of suspicious activity reports that came from the U.S. Treasury and FinCEN. And these had analyst notes on them. And so I'm giving a little more detail than what even Durham described. But these documents essentially had case numbers. They were being investigated in these 3 different field offices. And what they were investigating and had found a high credibility of criminal activity was in four categories, and those were money laundering, securities and exchange fraud, public corruption, and terrorism financing. Now, one of the things that's in this document on page 78 that I found that was a little bit misleading was it said that these financial documents were unsubstantiated, based on Peter Schweizer's book, Clinton Cash. Now, that's partially true in that the bank, their liaison, who basically reports things to the U.S. Treasury, suspicious activity reports, their initial looking into things was, initiated by book by Peter Schweizer. But the fact is that by the time the FBI got them, these documents, the ones that I looked at, had already had analyst notes, had already been, given a high credibility rating of criminal activity, and it showed that there was an open criminal investigation. And so it's misleading to say that they were unsubstantiated, because by the time that, I got them and looked at them, they were substantial. They had the entire money trail. They had all the bank accounts. They had all the foreign countries, all of the shell corporations and the shell, charities and things like that, where the money was changing hands and going, eventually into the Clinton Foundation. And in one case, you had money going out of the Clinton Foundation and was being paid on a monthly basis to the chief spokesman for the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, and he was on the terrorist watch list. And so These were regular monthly payments of around $9,000 a month, which looked like a salary coming from the Clinton Foundation. So that was being looked at for terrorism financing. So despite what this report laid out, I'm glad that these things were pointed out, because ultimately the American people need to know, what was going on, and the main stark difference. And the main reason that Durham talked about is he was trying to show difference between something that had some, real evidence that the FBI was looking at, and yet they decided to shut down an investigation and to completely squash it, versus when you look at what they did to Trump in opening up, a multi-year, investigation. They violated his rights with the FISA and 702 warrants. They were spying on everybody in Trump's campaign, and it was all based on lies that were invented by Hillary Clinton's campaign with the Russia collusion hoax. So, and that is what he showed in there. He didn't get into really, dealing with anything outside of his predicate, which was to investigate what the origins of the Trump-Russia collusion investigation were, whether it had a predicate. But I think there needs to be further investigation. In fact, I think investigation is not enough. If all we ever do is expose people, then nothing's going to change. The only thing that's going to change something is if somebody goes to jail and they're held accountable for violating the rights of American citizens and spying on them, opening up fake warrants and fake criminal activity. But ultimately, my whistleblowing led to me being having my home raided by the FBI. And this came out after it was already made clear that I was a protected whistleblower, and yet the FBI raided my home. They ended up, when I think it was the Daily Caller, they submitted a FOIA request to the judge that signed off on the search warrant, asking one single question. They just wanted to know, was the judge made aware that I was a protected whistleblower? And a different judge, an Obama appointee, ended up putting a seal on that answer. So,
wow.
We have a system of justice right now that is not equal justice under the law. It is a two-tiered system of justice, and it has been weaponized and used against conservatives, against Christians, against pro-lifers, against parents going to school, school board meetings and wanting to hold teachers accountable. It's clear that our Justice Department is in the hands of some really bad people, and we've got to do something to stop that.
Yeah, absolutely have to do something to stop it. I think back to, and I think we all remember when James Comey, the former director of the FBI, your former boss, he was your boss at the time. We remember when he came out for that press conference, and he said this. He said, no reasonable attorney that would bring charges against Hillary Clinton and the Clinton Foundation for any crime. And subsequently, you have all this information that you've brought out, and now we see the Durham report. What's happening now? Where's this going to go from here?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that. That was the turning point for me. Up until that moment, I didn't know for sure if they were going to cover it up. What originally caused me to look into things was a rumor in the office that somebody had seen a transcript of a conversation, which Durham talks about that conversation as well. I never found those transcripts, but those transcripts basically said that the FBI was going to, the senior staff on the seventh floor had decided to cover it up because they thought Hillary Clinton was going to get elected and they were afraid of retribution from her. Now, I ended up, at that point, I decided I needed to look into it. And so I went and looking into the classified network. I found not those transcripts, but what I did find was all the evidence that I just described to you. But they all had case numbers and it all showed that it was being actively worked. So I didn't think that there was any truth to the rumor, at least not at that point. So I just kind of held off doing anything about it and continued to kind of watch. When Comey came out and made those comments, one of the things he mentioned that was incredibly important was he made the statement that he first laid out a litany of problems of what they had found on the email server. And one of the things he mentioned that was on the email server was there were 7 email chains that had they had what's called SAPs, which are essentially a SAP is a special access program. It is top secret, but it's in a whole nother category. Even if you have a top secret clearance, you can't see what's in a SAP unless you've been read on to the program. And so you have to have a need to know, and you have to sign non-disclosure agreements. You have to be read on to the program, and it is essentially above top secret. So I have been read on to several SAPs in my career. I've been in cybersecurity for 26 years and working primarily with the Defense Department and then with the FBI for a few years. And then what I know about SAPs, though, I can tell you is that there's no easy way to bring them out of a SCIF. It's not like you can just print them out and walk out with them. You can't put them on a thumb drive and walk out with them. These systems don't have the capability oftentimes of even allowing a thumb drive on them because they don't want somebody doing just that. So the question was never answered by Comey as to how those top secret SAP programs ended up on her email server. That was never answered, and I found that very troubling. When I was trained and brought through NSA, I was with Marfor Cyber for a while, and was attached to detached to an NSA unit called the Cyber Protection Team. And we were read on to all kinds of interesting, programs, primarily those related to, our surveillance systems, 702, FISA, that kind of thing. And what really kind of shocked me was, we were warned at that time that, if we violated, our agreements to basically, mishandling of classified, and this was more than that, taking classified information out of a SCIF and then putting it on a private email server, that would fall under the Espionage Act. And so I don't know how he could make that claim that no reasonable prosecutor would bring a case. In fact, that same year, there was a Navy enlisted guy who was on a submarine who took a picture of his bunk. That was it. There was nothing, no classified documents revealed in there or anything like that. He just simply took a picture of the hot racks that they sleep on inside of a submarine. And because of that, he was put in prison. And so, it made no sense to me how she could get away with what she got away with. And then to find out that the Chinese had access to that server and other countries also had access to that server, that it was likely hacked. And so my question has been all along, was it a Dropbox?
Yeah, so at the time, you're blowing the whistle on Clinton, the Clinton Foundation. At the time, the chief of staff, John Podesta, we all know the pervert that is John Podesta. The VP of the Podesta group at the time was a man by the name of Riley Moore. Can you tell us about your relationship with Riley Moore?
Well, Riley Moore is, right now, he is the treasurer of West Virginia. And of course, that's where I live, in West Virginia. And he is running against me. I'm actually running for Congress in West Virginia, and he is one of my primary opponents. Probably the main opponent that I'm running against that I have to overcome. And you're right. At the same time, I was blowing the whistle against Hillary Clinton and her crimes, and he was working for John Podesta, who was Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman. And John Podesta and Tony Podesta are brothers. They owned a lobbyist firm called the Podesta Group, and Riley Moore was their vice president. He was also, through their company, he was not only a lobbyist in Washington, D.C., essentially bribing, Congress people for their votes, but he was also a foreign registered agent. And you can't make this stuff up, but he was a foreign registered agent with the Ukraine, the pro-Russian Ukraine, and, very corrupt government. He was also with the represented the Socialist Republic of Vietnam, Azerbaijan, you name it. I mean, just a ton of countries, Iraq, Hong Kong. And so, these things aren't illegal, but one has to wonder, if you, and I'm sure you can appreciate this, as a minister, you wouldn't take somebody who's, never repented for, being a prostitute and bring her into your church to be a marriage and family counselor,
Right.
So I look at like somebody who's a lobbyist and a foreign registered agent wanting to be, having basically spent the large portion of their career bribing politicians, now wanting to be a politician. I find that problematic.
Yeah. So, let me ask you right now, how's your campaigning going?
Well, it's interesting, I want to clarify something from the beginning. I didn't do this because I wanted to. In fact, the last thing on earth that I wanted to do after going through having my name, exposed, my family exposed, having, my home raided, all these other things with the FBI, the last thing I wanted was to be out in the public sphere and all of that. I had just gotten my life back. I was never charged, and I never even had a ding on my security clearance. But that whole experience, the FBI never tells you when they're done investigating you. I'm quite certain that I had a 702 opened on me for at least 2 years, where they were spying on me very intrusively, for over 2 years after it came out that I was a whistleblower. And so I really wasn't looking forward to, being in the limelight. But back in November, I was, after the election, I was very disappointed in the results in Arizona, in Michigan, and Georgia, as well as Pennsylvania and some other places where it seemed to me like none of the lessons from 2020, really were learned, and there was still cheating that was going on. And I ended up, and I would know, I was part of actually a election integrity unit that was put together by the White House after the 2020 election, and I was providing information and doing research into it because of my background in cyber, and providing that information to Peter Navarro. So I ended up basically praying with my family and was just asking them, or I was asking the Lord to raise up righteous men and women to run for office. And then I heard that still small voice saying, what about you? And my initial reaction was, whoa, hold on a minute, God. You can't, isn't there somebody else you can call to do this? I really don't like Washington, D.C. and haven't I been through enough? But I've also learned that you never say no to God. At some point in time, you got to accept what He's asking you to do, and you have to trust Him. And so I tried to negotiate with God, which generally never turns out in my favor. But I said, God, I don't see a path. I don't see any way that I could do this. Alex Mooney was my representative, and he had just won re-election with like over 70% of the vote. He's got a conservative voting record, and the state election really wasn't on the table for me. I don't have the ability to take off. It's a part-time position, and I don't have that ability to be able to do that and go live in Charleston so for me, it's an all or nothing type of thing. And really the only option for me was to run for U.S. House of Representatives. And so I just said to God, I said, Lord, if you want me to run, then you're going to have to create a path. And if you create a path, I'll run. And I thought I had bought myself, 6 to 8 years with that and thinking I was smart. But 2 days later, I was on my computer typing in Alex Mooney's name, and it dropped down in the little drop down below the search bar, and it said, Alex Mooney 2 seconds ago just announced that he's going to run for the Senate seat against Manchin in 2024. And so I kind of just, my heart sank at that moment. I realized, oh my gosh, what have I got myself into? But I went and I filed my paperwork. And so as far as how the campaign's been going, I've been praying and just seeking God all along the way. My wife is running my campaign, and she's a good person to run my campaign because she's the only person I can't say no to. And so she's had me speak in 18 different counties in the last month, and everywhere I go, I'm winning the hearts and minds of the people. It's really going to be a race to get out there and meet as many people as I can. That is how I win this race. And so I've been out there talking. We just held an event this last week in a town called Petersburg. We had about 30, to 35 people that showed up, people I had never met before, which is great. And, after the meeting, they were all still there, which was good. And they hung around for about an hour. And, we continued to have, questions and answers and socialize and talk with folks. And it was a really, really good time. And so this is what we're experiencing everywhere we go. Now, my opponent, on the other hand, has not been anywhere. I've not seen him campaigning anywhere. But he's got a lot of money. He's got a lot of connections in the political world. He's the nephew of our Rhino Senator Kelly Moore Capito. And so he's very connected in with the political establishment here in West Virginia, whereas I am not. I'm a complete outsider. I've lived in West Virginia for 2.5 years. Traveled a lot, all over the place because of military service and serving my country. And we finally said, we're done. We're going to settle. We want to live somewhere where people have the same values that we have, where people respect the Constitution, where they love their country, they love God, they love their families. And that's where we ended up looking around, and West Virginia seemed like the right place to go. And we've been happy ever since we moved here.
Well, and you'll remain happy so long as you're able to influence things to continue in that direction. You said that you don't want to be in the limelight. I never wanted to be in the limelight. That's a good thing. However, God will put people in the limelight when they're faithful to do what's right. And you did that. You stuck your neck out for the American people. You at great risk to your own livelihood, and you were a truth bearer, and that is something that America is looking for. We know that when we talk about many politicians, we know we're being lied to, and when somebody like you steps up that's already proven to be a man of truth, that's something that's capturing the hearts and the minds of the American people. And I can't help but to think about the opportunity you had recently to confront Devin Nunes, who at the time was the chair of the Intelligence Committee. And I want to show a video of this, because really what you see in this video is that you have captured the heart and the minds of the people. You have a lot of support in the audience. Let's take a look at that real quick.
So I'm Nate Cain. I was the Uranium One whistleblower that disclosed documents to your office. And I know that you guys were being spied on by the FBI, but I wanted to know what happened to those documents that I handed over. Did you guys get them? Were you able to do anything with them? And as I'm now running for Congress in West Virginia, what may I be able to do with them?
Is this a question for Devin? Okay. For Devin. Yeah. So as you may remember, we opened up that investigation. We had that investigation going. And then a really bad thing happened. A guy named, the Democrats took over, and I went from being chairman of the House Intelligence Committee to the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee. And a very nice guy, one of Cash's buddies, Adam Schiff, took over that position. And so anyway, at that point, everything was buried. I mean, they basically shut down everything. The only thing we had at that point, even still going on, even on Russiagate, was because we had the Horowitz investigation still going from the IG, obviously Durham, but we were completely, Schiff ended all investigations into Russiagate, into everything else.
Schiff happened. Okay.
All right, so shift happened. So, like I said, you could see there the response from the audience. People are looking for somebody who's going to be a truth bearer, and you have done that, and now people are jumping on board.
Yeah, and it has been, it's been overwhelming. Like everywhere we've gone, it has really been, I think, God going ahead of us and preparing the way. One of the things that he's been speaking to me is that, this is going to be a little bit like the Gideon situation in that, I think, people are probably looking at me and, I don't have a political advisor. I don't have, basically we're bringing in money and spending it as quickly as we bring it in. I think we've raised like maybe $30,000, and oftentimes I don't know, how I'm going to do the next thing that we need to do. And I'll be like, God, hey, I need to print some materials. And then out of the blue, somebody will write us a check for $500. I mean, that's how we're living. We're living day by day by God's grace. And, we're getting out there. I'm speaking this weekend. I'll be up in Weirton, and I will be the keynote speaker at a Constitution rally. And so I'll be talking about our civil rights and how the federal government has been abusing them, and the importance of us securing those rights again, and talking about that. But we've had some really great opportunities, to get out there and speak, and so there's good things happening. More important than anything, though, is as I get out and I talk to people, I felt the Lord really impress this upon my heart that everywhere I go, I need to end my speech or my conversation with asking people, please pray and fast and repent on behalf of the nation at our next National Day of Prayer, which incidentally falls literally like within a week of the primary elections. We need God's intervention in our country. As much as I am, willing to work hard and to sacrifice for my country and for the state of West Virginia, it's not enough. We are facing an enemy that can't be seen. It is a spiritual enemy more than anything, and it's going to require, all of us, to ask for God's help. We need His help in order to secure this country and, against this malevolence that's going on right now. We're looking at basically, my campaign is focused really on three separate things. The first thing is restoring our constitutional rights. These are our God-given rights. They're not given to us by government. They're supposed to be protected by government. But what you have happening right now, whether it's free speech being censored and suppressed through what we saw happening with the Twitter files, or accounts being shut down. Also, we know from the last Tucker Carlson interview that he did with Elon Musk that the federal government is spying on us directly through, places like Twitter and Facebook and other services, social media accounts where they have full access into it. I think Twitter's just the tip of the iceberg. In fact, I know it is. It's not even a matter of what I think. It's a matter that I know, and I can't get into much more of the details than that. But there's also, we have, our gun rights are being threatened with the ATF, pushing these rules, which really fly in the face of, our Constitution, which clearly states, that our Second Amendment shall not be infringed. And yet, the Biden administration seems to think that, he can have the ATF legislate, and that's got to stop. You have, the most important right of all, our right to life. And you've got some states that are pushing, pushing abortion all the way to birth and even after. That's infanticide. And so, there's crazy things happening. In January 6th, you have the people that are in jail for 2 years for essentially a nonviolent crime of walking around in the people's house. Let's remember, that's where they were, the people's house. And they were charged with misdemeanors, but they were also charged with disrupting, an official proceeding. And many of these people, are getting sentences to 20 years, 30 years, 50 years. In some cases, these people weren't even in Washington. And so it's insane what we're seeing right now. We're seeing, People left in cells for 23 hours, and then they get 1 hour in a day to basically see the sky. That kind of thing it's inhumane. I don't even think what we're seeing in Washington D.C. that it would even meet the criteria of the Geneva Convention for prisoners of war, and yet we're seeing these things done to American citizens, and it's only one side. Let's not forget, you had this the Washington D.C. on fire after the 2020 election because of Antifa and BLM, and many cities that have burned to the ground, and yet you don't see any of them in jail. And so this has been, like I said, a weaponization and a specific targeting of conservatives, targeting of Trump lovers, a targeting of pro-lifers. They kicking down the door and entering the house, fully armed to the teeth, of a pro-life activist, in front of his young children. I mean, these kinds of things that we're seeing right now are the things that we expect in third world dictatorships, not in the United States and the land of the free. So that's the number one issue to me that's on my heart that we have to address. Also, our national security is under attack. You have the Biden administration essentially weakening our military by introducing wokeism into our training. We have our soldiers are being taught to be sensitive to gender pronouns rather than being taught to be warriors, with the possibility of having to lay down their lives and make the ultimate sacrifice for their country. No, they're more concerned about teaching them to respect somebody's gender pronouns. And then you have transgenders in the military, which makes no sense at all. We don't allow blind people, in the military. We don't allow mentally handicapped people in the military. And there's a reason for that. The military is not about equal opportunity. It is about war fighting. It is about defending and protecting our country. And you certainly can't have somebody, who's got mental health issues and doesn't know who they are, doesn't know what gender they are, and has to take, injections for hormone treatments. What are they going to do when they're in a combat zone out in the field?
Right.
There's some really crazy things happening in our Defense Department. You have a wide open border where they're allowing anybody in, and that is, our border, is national security issue. You have also our petroleum reserves being depleted and sold off to China. So there's a lot happening right now that needs to be focused on. And the last thing is prosperity. But prosperity, you can't hold on to it if you don't have security, at your national borders, or security from your foreign enemies, and also security from the tyrants running the country right now.
Right. And I'm with you 100%. We need to pray. We need to repent. We need to fast. And the only hope is our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. However, we look at James Comey. He was talking about what a Trump presidency would look like. I want to play a clip, and I want to get your point. We only have a couple minutes left, but I want to get your take on his view on what a Trump presidency would look like. Let's listen to this.
Well, think about what 4 years of a retribution presidency might look like. He could order the investigation and prosecution of individuals who he sees as enemies. I'm sure I'm on the enemies list. Because the president constitutionally does oversee the executive branch entirely, which includes the Department of Justice, prosecutors and investigators. And so he could commission, direct that individuals be pursued.
Their hypocrisy knows no bounds, but what's your take on that?
Well, I've actually, I've talked with some friends of mine, and we were discussing this issue of, Trump and some of the other candidates, that are running, and there's some other candidates that are good candidates too. But I think the American people want to see some retribution. And I don't mean in an unfair way. I think everybody deserves their day in court. I'm not talking about extrajudicial anything, but these people are criminals. Hillary Clinton, she was a criminal, and she basically walked. Biden's, as we're finding out from Representative Comer, he's been involved in money laundering with China, no less. Our enemy, and so these people absolutely must be prosecuted. There has to be law and order, and he's right. It's funny. The Democrats were all about talking about how, the FBI is an independent institution. The DOJ is supposed to be independent. Baloney. President of the United States is supposed to be in charge. And quite frankly, that was the biggest problem in Trump's his first term was he never had control over the FBI, the DOJ, and quite frankly, the intelligence community. Never. He was basically, from the very get-go, they were working against him. They were actually spying on him. They were, targeting him with Crossfire Hurricane on fake, ironically trumped up charges. And so, they certainly do need to be brought to justice. And there's a law on the books right now called deprivation of rights under color of law. That needs to be brought to bear against these guys because it holds penalties that go all the way up to life in prison. And in the case of somebody losing their life due to depriving somebody of their civil rights, they can get the death penalty. So it's a very, very strong law, and it can be used against federal, state, local officials, and even healthcare providers.
Well, we certainly want to see some justice. We know biblically that there's going to come a point in time where the love of many will grow cold because lawlessness will abound, and we seem to be in a time like that. But I don't want people to be without hope. I know we need to continue to fight the good fight, stand for what is true, what is right. Nate Cain, how can people connect to your campaign if they want to give, if they want to contribute in some way?
So they can go to my campaign website, which is natecain4wv.com. That's NATECAIN, the number 4wv.com. That's also my Nate Cain for WV is my social media handle pretty much everywhere. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Truth Social, Gab, Getter, you name it. If there's a social media site out there, I probably I'm on there. And when I post one, I post everywhere. But on my campaign site, you can find all the interviews that I've done. This one will be posted up there as well, and on the media section. And then there's there on the front page. There's also a donate button, and that's an important part of this. I remember a couple years back was the first time I ever donated to a candidate outside of my state. The reality is that when we're looking at Congress, we need a majority in the Congress of people who are going to vote the right way, and so it's important that we absolutely support candidates that are going to do the right thing. And even if we live in a place where we don't have maybe a good option or maybe a great option, but maybe we have a satisfactory one. The point is we need to be supporting candidates all over that are going to do the right thing for the American people, because it takes a majority of those 435 votes in order to get things done.
Right.
And so I am asking that people help, support my campaign. And of course, please also do, pray for our campaign and pray for, my wife and me and everyone involved, because it is absolutely, we're coming up against a lot of spiritual warfare.
Yeah, I'm sure you are. And we do appreciate what you're doing, your willingness to stand for the American people, stand for truth and righteousness, and bringing glory and honor to Jesus Christ. So thank you so much, Nate Cain, for joining us on Our Watch. Love to have you back on in the future.
Thank you for having me.
All right. God bless you. And thank you all for tuning into Our Watch. Again, like this video, share it out to your friends and family, and we'll see you next time right here on Our Watch with Tim Thompson.